I'm very glad indeed to be here, and it's very nice to come back to LSBU, from which I actually retired a couple of years ago, but I still retain close links, and I'm very proud to have been asked to take part in this event today. Just a very brief overview. My own background is that in 1984, I came into the engineering industry with the Engineering Industry Training Board, where I was doing work on women's initiatives in particular, and a wide range of activities, including research on women apprentices and ways of improving that. Yes, and then after I was head of the Women in Engineering Centre at South Bank, was then South Bank Polytechnic, I moved into the Polytechnic itself, as it then was, and started lecturing. And right from the very beginning, I was working on the Higher National Diploma in Electrical and Electronic Engineering, and doing a lot of work with the employers of apprentices on the part-time route. And that led me into working with Caroline Sudworth, and we co-authored a winning bid to the Higher HEFCIS Degree Apprenticeship Development Fund, and here we are today. There is a long tradition of apprenticeships, of course. The idea of people who are skilled in a craft, passing them on to the next generation, and taking ownership of their crafts. If you think about it, the cathedrals were built by master craftsmen, and not just masons, but also carpenters and and generally woodworkers and glaziers. Think about the beauty of a medieval glazed window, stained glass window. So that principle of young people being trained in a craft actually probably goes back to way before antiquity. And it seems to have continued for a very, very long time. The idea of learning on the job, reaching a point of skill where you've completed your apprenticeship and then become a journeyman, and then carry on and complete your masterpiece, your literally masterpiece, to gain recognition of your skills. So the idea of apprenticeships has been so embedded in our whole society and our industry, and it was only very, very comparatively recently, back in the 1980s really, that there was a challenge to the idea of apprenticeships being time-based, to move forward into the idea of skills-based, and an apprentice being able to demonstrate that they have the skills necessary to achieve mastery of their craft. Can you move the screen? Lovely, thank you. So, and again, please, thank you. Now, part of the problem was the Engineering Industry Training Board and the other training boards ceased to be statutory bodies right at the end of the 20th century. And at that point, there were great difficulties because it became much harder for there to be certification. And can you move on, please, Dean? And so, Dean, can you move on, please? Thank you. And so we reached a situation where there were lots of questions being asked about, oh, that's it. Questions were being asked about the value of apprenticeships. Some industries, and notably the rail industry, very important, and other similar industries, continued with apprenticeships, continued to recognise their value. But there were others who were a little bit less enthusiastic about the idea. But in the same time, while that was all going on, the need for the kinds of skills that were needed within any job, whatever type of work it was changing as well. Certainly the engineering industry went through a massive change in the 1980s, and the number of craftsmen dropped by about 60%, while the number of professional engineers increased by 300%. So massive change in the profile of the industry. So when we came to apprenticeships, there were these two forces: one of the need to improve apprenticeships as a whole, but secondly, the need to increase the level of knowledge within an apprenticeship and to be able to offer the kind of knowledge and skills and as well and behaviors, as well as right the way through to level 7, as well as at the very base of the apprenticeships with the 16-year-old school leaver. So this is really the point that we've reached now, and no doubt apprenticeships will continue to change and develop into the future. But right now, I'd like to introduce Kat Rosier, and Kat is Senior Electrical System Design Engineer at Culham. But I remember Kat from way back when she was actually a student on the HND with me. So Kat, are you ready to go? And I hope you have fewer problems than I did with your slideshow.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that, Kate. I'm ready to go. Grand.
Thank you. Over to Kat.
Wonderful, thanks. So, right, yes, I'm going to just sort of talk around sort of, my experiences of apprenticeship and, how it's helped me really shape my career. And yeah, my name is Kat Rosier. I work at UKAEA on their Culham site within their race department, which is their remote applications for challenging environments, but more kind of in layman's terms, that's their robotics department. And I am the electrical program lead for the ETA program there and the ETA robotics. So from remote beginnings, I originally come from the Highlands of Scotland. My parents came from quite non-traditional kind of job backgrounds. My father is a gamekeeper and my mother is a housekeeper. So in terms of, sort of our more standard routes to education in terms of studying, especially when we think about really high-tech industries such as fusion, the idea of going to university, doing a degree, doing a master's, doing a PhD to become an engineer wasn't really the sort of option that I could actually go down. And in the Highlands, there's not a lot of technical apprentices around. You effectively have to move down to the lowlands, and the main industries sort of up that way are more towards Aberdeen and your oil industries. So I instead decided to move down to England. And I got a job at a small little company called Astles Control Systems. They were a chemical process control company and effectively controlling different chemical processes within large industrial environments. So it's actually that, and I apologize for the quality of it. That's a picture of me when I'm about 17 in a can factory in Rugby. But if you picture like a can, it has to get treated by a chemical process. And that's kind of what we did, was create all this equipment, all these different electrical systems and whatnot. When I joined Astles, they were actually the company who put me through my apprenticeship. And that was through London South Bank. So I initially was studying my HND, so doing that on day release, and doing all my revision, all my notes and all my actual coursework sort of in evenings and weekends and everything else to support that one day I was at university. After I finished my HND, I moved on to top it up to a BEng. And it was through a really similar thing, but to actually get a BEng, and a BEng that was accredited part-time from the IET, was a really substantial thing. And it was great because, it opened up a lot of different kind of experiences for me. One of the things that I loved about Astles Control Systems is I was an electrical engineer and I got introduced to electrical design. That's where I kind of learned about things like that. I did servicing, I did commissioning of machinery, so a lot of hands-on stuff as well as building sort of systems and, having a go with control cubicles and things like that. But I really love the fact that there was chemistry involved. So I got to exist in this really weird and wonderful zone of electrochemistry, where I was part electrical engineer, part with a bit of bucket chemistry. My dissertation was actually designing a chemical probe, so that measured very strong acids and whatnot. But that was what I did my dissertation on, and that's actually a product that Astles Control System now sells. But it was amazing to be able to do that because I could incorporate this learning and also working environment over the time at Astles Control Systems and LSBU. From Astles, I then moved to a company after I'd finished my apprenticeship and gotten a few years of experience. I moved on to a company called Gillard Cutting Technologies. They made a lot of different equipment, again, very custom. So it was sort of roughly around the area of sort of heavy manufacturing, but very, very custom sort of machinery. And, you know, from welders to cutting was one of the things I specialized in, but welders, cutters, you know, forming machines, packaging machines, and in a huge amount of different industries, from, and including very highly regulated ones such as food and medical. It was also through there that I got involved with things like learning a lot more about machinery safety through going on a fantastic fields course, but also learning about standards and the international communities in terms of involvement with the BSI and the IEC. And then I ended up in my current role, which is designing robots to maintain fusion power plants. This is something that I got really, really inspired by, and that's actually me at the ITA sign in France in Cadarache, and that's the ITA site. But it was a really fantastic career to get involved in. But when I was younger and I first learned about fusion, it was a science fiction thing and something that, yeah, you needed multiple PhDs to get into. But the idea that I happily sit in a very senior role, having done an apprenticeship, I feel incredibly proud to actually help support degree apprenticeships within that organisation and really, really promote the idea of non-classical education and that everybody's different and we need that diversity within the workforce. Hopefully I haven't gone over. Yeah, that was my route to fusion. And it's nice to be able to actually run my own team within UKAEA and develop these different systems from, this one here is Mascot. So that is more traditional remote handling person in the loop, robots and operators on one side, and it's literally an engineer robot that mimics everything that the person does, to more autonomous systems such as using industrial scale robots that also need to be radiation hardened to provide very precise movements and operations for very repetitive tasks, such as a good example that we always use is bolting in an electrical plug, but an electrical plug that weighs 48 tons and has 200 bolts on it. So getting that to actually be done within, fractions of a millimeter and perfect every single time. So that was my unusual route to fusion.
Our next speaker is Ruth Patananga, and Ruth is from another, Ruth is from yet another branch of engineering, just to illustrate the wide diversity within our industry, which is civil engineering. Ruth, I'm sorry to drag you in so unexpectedly. If you're ready, are you okay to go now?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Always let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, that's perfect. Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I'm actually a mechanical and energy engineer. I studied in France, actually, at ESTP Paris. It's a big institution for construction and energy industry work. And so I started there in 2013, in an engineering degree in apprenticeship. So I was actually an apprentice engineer. I'm not sure it's actually the same in the UK, but it has a lot of similarity. it's part-time at school, part-time at the company, and the company pays for your education. So it's quite great. It was a master degree, engineering degree in sustainability and construction energy and all that good stuff. So it was a 3-year after an HND. So it all sum up into the 5 years of master degree. In France, master degrees is in 5 years. So during my engineering 3 years, I started as an assistant project manager at the contractor. It's a SPI Batignolles. It's a big contractor like Bouygues, UK. And so it was during the 3 years. So I started as an assistant project manager and grow each year with a new position until ending with a junior project manager role. So I graduated in 2016, and I don't know if you can see it. I graduated in 2016, and they hired me, and I was a project engineer, and I worked in that company for a year. So my role was really being a site engineer. So I was doing all the design post stage 3 revamp, which means that a consultancy would design a project, and then before construction phase, I will review all the drawings, mechanical, electrical, and public health. And I will update it with the new constraint of the regulation, of the site issues, and I would supervise the construction work on site, M&E wise. So I will be like updating all this drawing like every Friday, and like dropping it every Monday at work at the site, and it was just hectic. And I was doing that like for 4 years actually, and yes, it was quite hectic. And responsibility starts very early when you are an apprentice. So you start early and you start taking on responsibility. At the beginning, it's a bit scary, because you're like, I don't know anything at all. They just throw me into these things. But it was amazing. I spent 4 years working there, and then I moved to the UK in 2017, 2018, and I started working. So currently, I'm a senior mechanical design engineer and sustainability consultant for Waterman Group. I also have my limited Ipsum Consulting Group, which I use as for my work on different sustainability projects. One of those is working as a collaborator for a research project led by LSBU on low carbon and energy saving and reducing of carbon emission on vertical transportations. It's currently on hold due to COVID and sanitary situation, but it's quite interesting. Keep an eye out. And I also work voluntarily. I'm a STEM ambassador. I'm a CIBSE and London vice chair. CIBSE is Chartered Institution for Building Services Engineers, and YEN is Young Engineer Network. So all these committees and activities, it's really what retained me into this industry, because it's quite tough, basically. Why engineering apprenticeship? So to be honest, when after my HND, I was a bit bored by studying all day. I'm quite curious. I'm quite I need to be challenged on a daily basis, and so a lecturer, teachers actually suggested to me apprenticeship for me to keep learning while gaining experience into something and really know what I'm applying into, like have a knowledge of the industry. And it was interesting because I wanted to have a degree that is specialized. I didn't want to have a general degree that would be applied to just nothing very specific. And it was good that I was paid for doing that. So it was a win-win. What's the benefits really? It was, I think, for young people, for young students, it's really interesting because I had that fear of, for myself, I had that fear of not knowing how will be the work environment, and will I know what to do, and will I be approaching the situation the right way? So it was good because it was a progressive responsibilities. It was giving me a working experience that will allow me not to be completely surprised by the environment I will be immersed to. It's progressive, and it's really good to have a diversity of knowledge, because just working all day, all the time at a young age, for me, it was just exhausting. And so having this balance actually helped me maintaining that rhythm and go through it. 3 years is a long time. So what are the pros and cons that I could raise from my experience? First, I think the first thing I wanted to say is that it grows your character. I work in construction industry, and I don't know if you see it, but I'm really tiny, like I'm 5 foot. So actually working in construction industry while I was an apprentice and going on site, it really grew my character, because there were situations and there were events that happen that actually you grow differently, and it helps you be resilient, because issues always happen. So what would you be upset? It's just work. The progressive responsibility, I mentioned it earlier, is one of the really big pros I will say, because that was really a fear of mine, and I know a lot of friends of mine had that same fear. Like they ask me all these things, I just graduated, I don't know what they're talking about, and it just removes that unknown idea, and it helps you have hands-on engineering work right away. And because you're so young and eager to learn, your mind is just more open to absorb a lot more information. That is just my experience. There are cons that I could raise. It's, for example, it's the intensive rhythm. I said it before, you have to work and you have to study, and it's not the same rhythm. You don't get to enjoy your student life like your mates do, because there are days where you will be on site over the weekends, or working on a project to deliver, or like it's just continuing learning and non-stop for 3 years, and it's really it can be exhausting. It just comes to find the balance and know yourself, and know how to find ways to step back and, you know, recharge. It's a lot of responsibility at a young age, which can be scary, but at the same time can be very revealing to yourself about how much you can take. And the double performance pressure is one that I didn't expect. And I wanted to highlight it in this presentation, because you get to have the pressure of being performant at school, because your company receive your grades. And when you are at the company, you get to perform properly because the school grades you based on your performance at the company. So you have that double performance pressure that sometimes can be a little bit too much. But hey, I'm telling you, I just took that responsibility thing too seriously. Some people, you just need to be chill. I think looking back at my experience, I was just way too serious about this thing. It's just you just have to learn to know yourself and learn how to grow with the rhythm, and it really works. It's just amazing. It's just an amazing experience that I will recommend to everyone, because there's nothing like pressure to reveal yourself and to grow you and to, well, to teach you who you really are. So I really, really enjoyed it, and I will recommend it to everyone. So quick advice, I set when you want to start an apprenticeship, I would say assess your discipline level, because you have to be quite disciplined with yourself and know your boundaries. Go to open doors on campus, chat to alumni and staff, and get to know the school and the system and the rhythm. And if it fits you, that will be great. And look for the right home company for yourself. You know, not just like a company that will help you get into the school, but a company that fits you and really will help you grow as an engineer. It's hard, but it's totally worth it. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, perfect, thank you. So hi everyone, I'm Megan Whitbread. I'm a building services design apprentice for Troop by Alton Anders. I work in London in Evershot Street by Euston. Well, I have done for the past 5 years. I started in 2015, but for the past roughly a year now, I've been working from home. First trip was back to the office this week, so that was an interesting one. Dean, if you could go to the next slide, please. So firstly, I thought I'd give a bit of an introduction as to why engineering. So I think I first kind of realised I wanted to get into engineering in primary school when we had to do a project on the Romans, and most of the other children in my class decided to do mosaics that were all put up on the wall, and I decided to build an aqueduct, which kind of showed me I should probably go down a different route. Dean, if you could go to the next slide, please. So since then, I obviously went on to secondary school. Initially, I wanted to study an engineering diploma. I went to an all-girls school for reference. This was an option at GCSE, but there was only myself and one other girl out of a whole year that wanted to do the engineering diploma. So as a result of that, it was pulled due to lack of interest, which was really frustrating. So I ended up doing product design instead. And on the left there, you can see my GCSE final piece, which was a clock top, as I called it. So a cabinet with a built-in clock and some lights in it. And yeah, that was kind of my initial step into hands-on engineering. So from there, I moved on to sixth form. I've really decided that engineering was the route for me. I moved down to the boys' school just down the road for sixth form and studied engineering. On the right there, there's a picture of my AS level final piece. It was quite a challenge. We had to make a robot, but all of the guys in my class had studied engineering from GCSE, and some of them even from year 7, so they knew how to use all the tools, they knew how to use all the software, and for me it was very much a catch-up game. Luckily I had some really supportive people in my class, and my teacher was really great in helping me as well. So on the right is a picture of the Viscardi bot, as we named it. It was a fully programmed robot. We had to compete in robot wars, and I think it actually won it actually. The only one without a weapon, but the one that could run away from everything, so it was quite good. The next slide, please. So why building services engineering? It actually started from a school project that I did. It was with the Goldcrest Award at the University of Kent. So it was an initial assessment with a local company. One of the guys actually went to my school that's now the managing director for it, and they kind of came in each year and did different projects with the engineering A-level students. So we did an initial energy assessment for the school, which was built in the 1950s, and tried to figure out ways that we could make it more energy efficient, the annual running costs of it, and what we could do to improve it. And that was kind of my first real step into building services. The guy from the company, the managing director, said that I'd be able to have a job there. It's working around the corner from my school. I went to school in Dartford in Kent, and I thought, I'm young, I really want to kind of go and experience the big city, see what the life's like up there. So I started looking around for apprenticeships because I didn't want to complete sixth form. So I looked at apprenticeships and I found Troop by St Anders, which is how I ended up where I am today. Next slide, please. So from then until now, so I started at TBNA in 2015. I started on a level 3 advanced apprenticeship, which was 1 day a week going to college at South Thames College in Wandsworth, the other 4 days a week working in the office or on site, and completing an MVQ alongside that. So that was for the first 2 years of my apprenticeship, and then I moved over to LSBU to complete my BEng, which I'm currently in my final year of, and have 2 exams and 2 assignments to do within the next month, so that's really great. So the final year of that now, and hopefully I'll get my IEng accreditation once I have graduated. Next slide, please. So why TBNA? I think this is a key question, especially for employers when they're looking at hiring apprentices. The things that make your company stand out to apprentices. So I specifically, it was my parents actually helped me find an apprenticeship. They could see I wasn't happy in school. And the key things that stood out for me about TBNA was the Investors in People Awards, because I thought, okay, great, they'll actually have that work-life balance. They'd won National Apprenticeship Awards for their apprenticeship scheme, and the Princess Royal Training Award more recently as well. I think one of the things that sold it for me was at the interview, I was interviewed by the managing partner at the time and my now boss, and both of them are partners, so they both own parts of the company, and both of them started as apprentices, so it was a really clear kind of pathway of where I wanted to be. They'd already done it. The next slide, please. So from then until now, just a brief overview of some of the projects that I do and what I actually do. So essentially I'm a building services engineer, bring buildings to life. So an architect will produce the design for the building, and we will go and put all the services in it and make it actually habitable for people. So some of the projects I've worked on so far include the Royal Papworth Hospital, which was a £160 million specialist cardiac hospital in Cambridge, I believe, and Nuffield Health, which I'm still currently doing at St Bart's Hospital. It's a £28 million new build with an existing facade. So I specialise in healthcare, which was really scary when I first came into it, because I think I was on my first week there, and one of the older apprentices said to me, if you mess this up, someone could die. Well, obviously they couldn't, because it would be checked. But yeah, that was a big scary thing. The next slide, please. So more recently, I had the pleasure of working on the Royal London Hospital, the Queen Elizabeth unit, which is the massive COVID-19 ward, not the temporary hospital at Excel, but the one at Royal London Hospital. It was an extreme project. It was 5 weeks, really intense, whole design, and it was built within those 5 weeks as well. It was late nights and weekends, but it's amazing to say that I was a part of it. So successes. In engineering terms, I'm currently working on the Culham Bournemouth Hospital, which is a massive trust merger down in Culham, Bournemouth. So it's a £150 million hospital, and it's the first time I've actually managed a team of engineers, and I'm reporting directly to the partners. So it's a lot of pressure producing the electrical design for that, and a lot of lighting design as well. But it's something that's really enjoyable, and also a lot of Section 136 suite projects, which is mental health projects that are scattered around Sussex, which are also nice little projects that we're doing at the moment. Next slide, please, Dean. So on to non-engineering successes, but still successes within my career. I've been lucky enough, as Kate said earlier, to win the SIDSI Young Engineer Awards Apprentice of the Year 2020. I was shortlisted for a WISE Award. I hate this slide so much. I hate talking about this. I was winner of the London Regional Apprenticeship Awards and highly commended at the National Awards. And on the left, I was trusted at an award ceremony to go and hand out an apprenticeship awards at the IHEM Awards. And on the right, you may have seen this on bus stops, but I was lucky enough to feature in the government's campaign for apprenticeships, the Fire It Up campaign. Next slide, please. So benefits of the apprenticeship. Self-explanatory, you earn while you learn. I think it's a brilliant way of getting industry experience, getting personalised support from both the university or your training provider and from the company. You get nationally recognised qualifications. So from the end of my apprenticeship, I'll have a BEng, and it gives an overall faster route to professional recognition. Next slide, please. So my future plans, hopefully to graduate in 2022, COVID permitting, and I'm currently on track for a first-class honours degree. To achieve incorporated engineer status and to continue to obtain chartership and hopefully become one of the first female partners at Truth by St Andrews. Next slide, please. I was going to do a poll, but my computer's not working, so we'll skip that. So just some advice for some aspiring engineers. Firstly, be yourself. Don't be intimidated by those with more knowledge than you. Everybody starts somewhere. Ask as many questions as you can. Be an absolute sponge and learn as much as you can from those around you. Chances are they actually like teaching people, otherwise they wouldn't be in the position they are. You'll get things wrong, and that's okay. Ownership and responsibility is a part of the job. There'll be challenges to overcome. As a female in engineering, there will be challenges to overcome, but if your head and your heart is in the career, then you'll definitely get through them. Put any ideas you have forwards. You may have thought of something that nobody else has, and the little slogan at the bottom of "this is what an engineer looks like," because what does an engineer look like? And that is all. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you so much, Megan. I hope everyone agrees that was well worth waiting for. Thank you so much. And just before we go on to Caroline, I'd just like to sum up those three presentations, I think, because something Ruth said, which I think resonated with Kat and Megan's experience, and that's about the amount of responsibility that apprentices take on very, very early. But at this point, having looked at three different models of apprenticeships, I'd like to move on and ask Caroline Sadworth to outline the ways in which anyone can become an apprentice and move into the engineering profession. Over to you, please, Caroline. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Kate. I'm hoping that slideshow is now live. I'm hoping everybody can see it.
Yeah. I can see it.
Perfect. Okay. So I've got a slight confession. I've never been an apprentice, should I say, but I have helped a lot of apprentices get into engineering. My journey started way back when I was in university, actually, and helped to develop undergraduates, postgraduates, MSc students and PhD students. So in effect, those were the projects that we were handing out to them as universities to help them become research scientists of the future. So I got into that into apprenticeships kind of in that sense, because I loved getting people to learn while they were working on projects, and so that's how my journey began. Working with industry has been really critical to the way apprenticeships have developed, and a little while ago I started working with an organisation called the Technical Apprenticeship Consortium as a route to making sure that we had the right apprenticeships in the right place at the right time. Hopefully moving on to the next slide. Yep, ooh, there we go. So a little bit about the Technical Apprenticeship Consortium. The Technical Apprenticeship Consortium actually brings together engineering consultancy organisations to enable them to meet their business needs through the recruitment and training of talent. And most of that talent at the moment is through apprenticeships. Back in 2010, when the Technical Apprenticeship was originally formed, there were no real hard engineering apprenticeships in the construction and built environment. A lot of the apprenticeships that were existing at the time were very restricted to lower levels, often to skills such as bricklaying, plumbing and carpentry, and nothing really there to be able to take engineering design and pushing people into sort of the higher end of the design works that were needed for this industry. So actually there were 6 employers that came together back in 2010 to change that. And so Mott MacDonald, WSP, Arup, Capita, Halcrow, which is now Jacobs, and Hyder, which is now Arcadis, came together with the Institute for Civil Engineers, Pearson and Transport for London to make a difference. They set about bringing together some very new apprenticeship frameworks, as they were back then, in civil engineering and building services engineering, which you know Megan has just talked about. And so there was a lot of change there. There was a real need and a real wish to actually drive something different to what traditional graduate recruitment was offering. And not only that, there was a real pull from industry to make a difference to London at the time. 2010 we were quite London centric, and we weren't approaching and we weren't attracting talent of all different types. It was very much graduates, this is what we look like, but actually we needed to do more. So that was 2010. There's been lots and lots of changes in apprenticeships in that time. In 2012, the Doug Richard Review of Apprenticeships happened, and that positioned government to ensure that employers were at the heart of the apprenticeship system, driving forward the apprenticeships that they needed, but for them to invest in the development of those apprenticeships themselves. And in 2014, the very first apprenticeship standards were available with something called endpoint assessment at the end of it. And that is the assessment of competence against an occupational standard. And so they came on board in 2014, and the Technical Apprenticeship Consortium was one of the very first adopters, developing in 2015 and having government approval to develop a rail design technician apprenticeship and also a transport planning technician apprenticeship, and those are equivalent to, I'm going to say, 3.5, 4 A levels, and pushing forward through to engineering technician registration with the Engineering Council. Following in that, in 2017, our existing building services engineering and civil engineering technician apprenticeships were transferred over to the standard system. And then in 2017, we also launched our very first degree apprenticeships in civil engineering and building services engineering. Now we have made huge changes into the way industry actually perceives apprenticeships. Employers are driving apprentices, but they're also taking investment in apprenticeships, not only in the development of those apprenticeships for the future, they're also investing in them through the apprenticeship levy. Employers are having to use the apprenticeship system to release the apprentice levy funds. So it is a win-win situation for apprentices who want to come on and work for our sector. And it is really, really driving change. So we've now got what we call trailblazer groups. So those are groups of employers that come to get together to develop apprenticeship standards. And we've now got 8 apprenticeship standards, and I'm just about to take on several more. But we have now invested, our employers have invested over £70 million worth in the training of over 3,500 apprentices since 2015. So, and a lot of those apprentices are now coming to the point where they're completing their endpoint assessment. And I'm going to say 2,000 of those apprentices are at degree level, as well as the 1,500 we got at kind of at college level. So there has been huge changes, and we're actually getting more and more people into the professions. So I know Megan's become an Eng Tech with CIBSE. A lot of people are going for Eng Tech with the Institute for Civil Engineering. People are also going through to Chartered Surveyor, Chartered and Incorporated Engineer for civil engineering and so on. And ultimately people are looking for that chartership status. So that's where we currently are. So why would we choose an apprenticeship? One of the big challenges that we've had is age and perception. People think that our apprentices are often lower level for young people in traditional trades, and they're no longer that. It doesn't matter what age you are, you can take on an apprentice at any age, and it's there to be a learning at work method of learning. And there are over 500 occupations that you can now develop your competencies in. For engineering, it doesn't matter what part of engineering you want to work in, what level you are at, or what level you want to achieve. There is an apprenticeship that's going to be there for you. What is critical, though, is apprentices and employers working collectively with a training provider, London South Bank, South Thames College we've heard about today. And it is learning and taking your competence from, in effect, a novice status or a partially trained person, and taking them to the full competence over a period of time. And for us, that often leads to professional registration. What is critical is that tripartite agreement, though. Employers have to put more investment into apprentices. They might well be funding them, they might well be sending them to college and university, but employers also have to support apprentices with on-the-job learning and offer them mentoring as well, because that actually is the difference between doing a full-time course and doing an apprenticeship. It is a collective agreement that everybody will play their part. A lot of training providers offer apprenticeships with formal qualifications in them, such as BTECs and so on, but also now degrees. So actually you can gain a degree, you can gain your incorporated engineer status to be able, and that is all part of an apprenticeship. Apprentices, on the other hand, have to be really committed to doing an apprenticeship route. You do, as apprentices, you get everything paid for, and in return you are committing quite a lot of your time and effort to being an apprentice and learning on the job, as well as doing the full-time, often the full-time work that is required of that particular job. I'm going to say it is not an easy route to take, but the benefits of it versus a full-time role are significant. You do come out as a very trained person and are competent and often professionally registered in less time than what you would be following a normal traditional route. We were lucky enough to just a few weeks ago actually go back to some of our civil engineering apprenticeships that started at South Thames College, who started 10 years ago, and 10 years ago this just gone. We had the first cohort was 10 apprentices at South Thames College, and they all started on what we'll call the level 3, the technician apprenticeship in civil engineering. We had a great name, you've probably heard of this one, Regina Tumblepot. She works with Morgan Sindel, but obviously now she's completed her incorporated engineering degree apprenticeship, but she's moved to Coventry. She did that at Coventry University, but is now on maternity leave. That shows you that apprenticeships can be flexible. You're not geographically bound to where you started, and obviously there are different routes, stop and start points along the way. Again, we have Sean Butler, who now works for FM Conway. He's now a project manager and is now on his way to chartership. And he also left LSBU with a first-class honours degree in civil engineering. WSP, so Matthew Russell at WSP is now on his way. He's completed his HND, which WSP have paid for. And so that's an alternative route that you can take. And then obviously Elliot Wood, he's now a senior civil engineer and he's going to aim for his chartership by the end of this year. So 10 years on, he's gone from somebody at 16 and is going for chartership by the age of 26. I shall put my teeth back in there shortly. And then obviously we've now got Tom King at Atkins, who's also leading on major projects, delivering net carbon zero emissions in the water sector. So all of our apprentices who started 10 years ago have generally stuck, bar one of them have stuck with the industry that they started in. That shows you that apprenticeships give you a very clear, stable pathway through into and through this particular sector. Employers take on apprentices to develop and retain the talent they use, and they are committed to the recruitment of the best talent they can get. Getting an apprenticeship is probably harder than getting into Oxford and Cambridge these days. However, it's not the academic ability that employers are looking for. They want to see that spark that comes with you as an individual, and they want to see that you as an individual are committed to a career in this particular sector. In other words, it's a quid pro quo. You give, they give. So it doesn't matter where you start, where you want to aim for, how you want to get there. There is an option for you out there, and there is a clear career pathway for you to take. So we also asked some of their advice because, as I say, I'm not an apprentice. But for some of our apprentices who started 10 years ago, apprenticeships were the obvious choice. They didn't want to do full-time study. They were interested in getting some hands-on experience as well as getting paid. I mean, some of the cars that these guys drive around with, you know, put me to shame. So yeah, I'm really envious of them, and you know, they've got lots of the benefits of an apprenticeship and none of the financial hardship that a lot of full-time learners currently have. So those are the types of things that are coming through. I'll just quickly move on. So, as I say, is this the right pathway for individuals? It is a choice, and there is now actually a choice to be made. It is not either or. You don't have to do full-time study or part-time study. You can choose an apprenticeship, which is a blend of both. For an apprentice, it is not the easy route, and people think it might well be. It is not. It is hard work, but the benefits are there to be seen, and the return on investment for an individual is huge, but the return on investment for industry is also equally huge, because you're getting you know, somebody 4 days a week, or you know, if you're doing block release, you're getting, you know, really intense work, and for people to be able to show you actually, you know, how to do things differently. If we think about younger people doing apprentices, they often bring in much more digital savviness than people of my age, and so industry's gaining on that, making sure that, you know, the younger recruits, but even those who are upskilling the industry, are learning those skills that the industry is going to need in the future. When we actually spoke to Regina, who was one of the first female apprentices on this one, she said she was the first female on site for a long time, but actually now when she looks back, there are equal numbers of male and female engineers in the office and on site. So it has taken a long time to change, but it is changing, and their advice is absolutely go for it. It does take hard work and commitment, but you get out what you put in. And the other thing as well, which my other half always says to me, he works in civil engineering, you never get bored. Every day is different. And actually there's got to be some value in that one. So takeaway messages. Apprenticeships are here to stay. They're open to everybody and anybody. For employers, they tap into a pool of talent like no other. It doesn't matter if you're academically qualified or not to start an apprenticeship, you will become both academically qualified and competent at the end of that apprenticeship. And there are lots of different apprenticeships with different starting points and different endpoints. So you can flex where you start and stop, but you can also flex how you progress from one apprenticeship to another as well. So there are routes into and through engineering careers. And for us, the professional standards are often baked in as well. So you can go from engineering technician to incorporated engineer to chartered engineer through apprenticeships. Employers are looking to invest, develop and retain the talent for the long term. So if you are an apprentice thinking, or if you want to be an apprentice thinking going for it, you have to think about where you want to be in 5 years' time. Is this the organisation that you want to work for? Are the values that you have the same as the organisation? Because you will be there for quite some time, and it is a tripartite agreement with the employer, with the apprentice and with the training providers. They do demand that you think longer term. And so it is not just now. Think about what kind of person you want to be, where you want to work in the future, and if you are willing to commit. And that is not just the employer, but also the apprentice. You've got to work in partnership. I often get asked whether apprenticeships are the poor relation to traditional academic routes, and my answer is absolutely not. Apprenticeships are more demanding, they offer more, they deliver more than highly priced degree qualifications, because you come out with those as well as, you know, competence recognised by a professional body. You are in effect 2 to 3 years ahead of your full-time counterparts. So actually apprenticeships for me are the way to go. I will say that each route has its own unique selling points, but at least you know that there are different options out there, and those options give different benefits, and it is now becoming a personal choice. And I think that's all from me. And somebody asked me if I could find some more information, and I'm happy to share these slides. There is a lot more information on South Bank Apprenticeships because we do work a lot with them. Lambeth College is also setting up its apprenticeship programs for us as well at the moment. And obviously there are some info slides there as well. I'll be quiet now. You're on mute, Kate.
Sorry, no, oh, that was quick. No need for you to be quiet. I'm going to ask you to stay online, and I'm going to ask Kat, Ruth and Megan to come back in, please, if you would. I have already got a couple of questions on the Q&A. The first one is to ask, but I'll ask you if you wouldn't mind coming back in after I've asked Caroline the second question, and that is to all of you. Did you have anyone you looked up to on the start of your journeys to becoming engineers? So I'll leave you three to think about that for a moment, please. And Caroline, following on immediately from what you were talking about, somebody's asked, I'm 35 years old and want to do an apprenticeship to become an engineer. Will this be possible? And if so, what steps should I take? Now, I should say that came in quite early when you started speaking. So they might feel that quite a bit's been covered already. Yeah. But
yeah. Okay, so the answer is yes. One of the things that industry is looking for is for people to come back in, come back in as mature learners, and apprenticeships are flexible to any age whatsoever. There are 60 and 70-year-olds doing apprenticeships, so yes. What you would need to do is look at the companies that are recruiting apprentices and actually show them what the benefits of hiring a mature learner is. And so I would say build on that one, but say, yes, I want to be an apprentice and I want to learn as well. And actually think about the career pathway that you want to take as well. As I say, it is quid pro quo. They give, you give. So make sure that you both benefit from that journey. Hopefully I've answered that one okay.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Right. Kat, are you ready to come back in on who did you look up to at the start of your journey?
Yeah, absolutely, Kate. And you may actually remember the person in question.
Yes,
it was.
I know who you're going to say. I remember him very well.
Yes. So when I started at the company, and it's a really, really good sort of example as well to give on the basis of when we think about apprenticeships, a lot of the time we think about, big companies like Network Rail and, kind of National Grid and things like that. Astles Control Systems, the ones that took me through my apprenticeship, helped me top up to my degree. When I joined that company, it had 6 people in the whole of the company. It was tiny and it was amazing. It was a great little company and it was really fun. It was like really kind of like family orientated and brilliant. And the guy who inspired me massively was the guy who started that company, and his name was Peter Astles. He was a fantastic chemical engineer, absolutely, genius, brilliant. And one of the reasons he really, when I first met him, he really wanted to put me through this apprenticeship and everything else was because he was very, very bright, but he had actually, started a very, very formal kind of full-time degree when he was younger, and he'd completely failed. And he said full-time education wasn't for me. And it was only when he actually went on an apprenticeship himself and he did that. And it just rang true to me as such a young person, the idea of someone that was that bright and was that ambitious, who started his own company when he was pretty young, I'd say early 30s when he started that company. It was a really successful company. But it was the idea that he kind of said that he couldn't deal with that, he couldn't do the traditional thing. And it just made me go, wow, okay, I could be doing this. I could be starting my own company by the time I'm in my early 30s. I can have this great route. And yeah, he was the most inspirational person, I think, really, to my mind. But yeah, no, that's it.
I'm not surprised, having met him when when we did the your work-based learning, and I had to come and talk to him about your progress cat. He really is a very inspiring person, very, very impressive indeed. I'm not seeing Ruth on my list of people.
Not seeing me.
Oh, she's here. Hi, Ruth. Dean, can you put me back to Ruth, please? Yeah, Ruth, same question to you, my dear, please. Any inspirations?
To be honest, I think I was very lucky growing up and going through my studies, because I was always part of an environment with like strong female leads and engineers, and my older sister is a civil engineer, so I was always like encouraged to pursue like engineering. But actually, when I was doing my HND, I just felt like I was so bored, and it was just not. She was not encouraging. My math teacher, she was a researcher for nuclear industry, and she was such a smart woman. Like, and she saw something in me that I remember I didn't see in myself, because I was just like, I'm just done. I just don't see the point studying, because I was smart, but it's just like just studying it didn't have a purpose. Let's just say that. And she was so smart, and she looked like she got life figured out. Does that make sense? And she just took me out one day, and I remember my HND, we were 50 people, two ladies only, and she took me on the side, and she's like, you know what, Ruth, I think you should go for further study. I was like, I'm not sure. I rather stay here, and I don't see the point. And she actually told me, like, look, I see you can't you phase out in class because you're smart and you think that you're bored, but there's this special route that actually feeds your curiosity. Go for that. And she actually like introduced me to schools. She gave me like a slides with different schools that will match my perspective, and she actually encouraged me to apply for this school. So I really had strong female lead, but most particularly like people who looked at me and saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, which is great. It feels good.
So not so much a role model as a mentor.
Yes, I have a lot. I had, and I encourage it. I know Caroline talked about it. Like, you cannot. I don't see my life in engineering without mentors. I'm mentoring myself. I think it's fundamental to keep you grounded when you feel like you are overwhelmed with situations. It is fundamental. So
sorry. So you're mentoring. You are yourself a mentor now?
Yes, but like for STEM ambassadors, there are a lot of different schemes to mentor young kids.
Okay, no worries. Let's move on now and ask Megan if she had anyone you looked up to, was the question. Anyone at the start of your journeys to become an engineer?
When I was younger, before I started my apprenticeship, as I said in my presentation, I was extremely lucky that both of my parents fully supported my decision in wanting to leave sixth form and do an apprenticeship rather than the standard university route, much to my school's disappointment, because they wanted everyone to go to university and that was the way it worked. But I think I'm quite odd in the way that I think one of the things that inspired me even more to go into a career in engineering is my AS level maths teacher saying that I probably wouldn't be able to get a job involving maths. And then I became an engineer. But no, I think my dad trained as a computer technician. He kind of did one of the first apprenticeships, really, did City and Guilds. And I think my kind of technical engineering interest in breaking things as a child and not knowing how to put them back together probably came from him. But both my mum and my dad have been really supportive. And then when I got into the engineering career world, probably actually the former managing partner, which I'm pretty sure a few of you all know, Neil Weller, who is an absolute amazing person, does so much work for apprenticeships. I think he was awarded an MBE this year. He is just one of these people that you can see the complete career path, straight from apprenticeship all the way through the industry, chartership, and becoming the managing partner of the company, a really successful business. And hopefully that's the route I'll be able to follow one day too.
Fantastic. Right, just to summarize, purely by chance, our three participants have all illustrated completely different ways of being encouraged and influenced to work into engineering. One is the having an actual role model, which Megan and Kat both emphasised. Having somebody who's been down that route already, who is prepared to share, which brings us on to the mentorship, which, as Ruth said, is incredibly important to have a mentor, and she is now mentoring herself, other people. And then thirdly, and something that I don't think people realise is as important as it actually is, and from Megan, and that's about the importance of the family and family influences. We know from research that people who become engineers are more likely to have an engineer in the family. And that brings us into wider issues about why there aren't enough engineers, because a lot of people don't really know what's involved in engineering, and that's a shame. And it's something that, as an industry, we need to try and overcome. But then I can't remember who it was mentioned it. I think it was Ruth. STEM ambassadorships, and how important it is to actually take the message out to younger people, not just about apprenticeships, but about the huge value that engineering is to society as a whole, even if they don't become engineers themselves. Engineering is a hugely important contributor to our national economy and our national life. Dean, back to you, please, if you're ready. I don't think we've got any more questions coming in. Has anyone got any more questions they'd like to ask anyone? No. Dean, are you ready to take the meeting back, please? No.
Yeah, so I think we've got a question coming in now, actually. Okay.
We have, yes, indeed. From Carlos, thank you very much. Can you address an improvement of behavioural change with regard to equality and diversity? Now that's I think maybe, Caroline, would you feel able to address an improvement of behavioural change with regard to equality and diversity?
I'll give it a go, and I'll have a word with Carlos tomorrow for that one.
Yes, I think you should.
Yeah. Okay. I'm taking a put on this one, Carlos. Improvements in behavioural change in terms of regard to equality and diversity. So, within the apprenticeships that are developed by industry, I make sure that there is equality and diversity in the apprenticeships that are in there, and they are specific outcomes of those apprenticeships. Equally, you are becoming a professional through these particular apprenticeships that we put together, and so it has to be addressed. And it is my pet hate, and it still happens to me. I have to say it. You know, I walk into a room, oh, can I have a cup of tea? And it still drives me crazy, but it's just one of those things. And it's and Megan's boss Neil turns around and goes, "I hope you've picked the wrong girl there, mate." So I keep my mouth shut until needed. And so it still exists. There are issues with equality and diversity and inclusion within the industry, but only we can make that change, and we have to call it out every possible chance that we get, but do it professionally, do it making sure that we're still working with the people that were here and educating them in that sense. But apprenticeships do have it in there, which is great to see. Is that okay? Like I say, Carlos, I'll have a word with you tomorrow.
Yes, I do rather feel that, Carlos, that was a bit of a trap there, Carlos. Thank you very much indeed for that. Yeah, equality and, he says working hard to achieve it, yes.
Can I just say, one of the things that I noticed was a lot of issue can start being solved from institutions, engineering institutions like IET, IMK, CIBSE. Because I sit on a lot of different committees for these different engineering groups. And one thing I see is like, for example, now we have a committee called She Can Engineer. It's under West Women Engineering Society, and we organize inward in June. But we see more and more men getting involved in the team. So I think also having men step up and get involved in events that are mostly oriented towards women in engineering is a powerful message. For example, today as well, we had a CBZN committee chair meeting, and they talk about like how CBZ have built diversity and inclusion panel, and they are reviewing all the engineering document that CBZ have produced, and they realized that in a lot of documents since today, it's addressed like he, or it's addressed as a male gender. And like when I heard, I was like, oh, I'm surprised, because I didn't notice, because even we as women are used to it, to read documents from engineering institution addressed as men and addressed to men. And a lot of institutions are building panels to update that, to make sure that we tackle these issues. And I think that is a powerful message that we are heading in the right direction. You are muted, Kate.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, thank you. Yes, I'm back now. Something you just said, Ruth, reminded me of what I experienced 30 years ago when I first came into the electrical engineering department, which had just recently been headed by a woman, very, very influential woman in the whole of engineering, Professor Agnes Capozzi. She had recently left, but there was still a quarter of the lecturers were female. And it was very noticeable across the whole department, not just the women, but the men behaved in a much more female type of way. They were more open. They'd greet each other in the corridor by shaking hands rather than just sort of nodding at each other like they did in other departments. And it was just a softer environment. And I think that came down from partly the people who Agnes had recruited, but also the whole attitude, the ethos. And Carlos, coming back to you, I think you and your colleagues are indeed working hard to achieve it. It is about ethos. It is about how everybody sees themselves. And yes, sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we call somebody the wrong thing. That might be taken as an insult. Kat will remember me saying, "Hi, guys," because to me, guys is an inclusive term, but of course it wouldn't necessarily be seen as such by women in a class. And if there's only one woman in a class, she might feel quite upset. So you have to think about these things all the time, but also be prepared to recognize when you've made a mistake, but recognize other people do make mistakes as well. So any more comments from Carlos or anyone else? Kat?
Yeah, no, I've got a really good one, and it builds massively. And thank you for sharing, Ruth. Really, really liked your point about kind of like thinking about systems and kind of organizations. So like one of the things that we've got within my department at the moment is we've effectively doubled the size of our building. And it may seem like a really small thing, but the impact that has had on ED&I has been huge. So within our building, firstly, there are access for all abilities to all floors of it, and it's a 4-story building. Also, all toilets, shower blocks and everything else, they're all individual, but they're all unisex. So we're having those kind of experiences, but also we have a new prayer room. We have quiet spaces as well. And the way that actually happened was effectively, it was the directors coming to everyone and saying, post in your suggestions, what do you want to see in the new extension? And effectively loads of people, you know, because we're at Culham UKAEA, we've got massive kind of sort of networks within the international fusion world. So we're a very, very multicultural company. And what they were actually then getting was effectively loads of people saying, oh, I'd love one of these, I'd love one of those. Unfortunately, we didn't get our beanbag room, but it was kind of, yeah, it was kind of one of those things of the fact of like, it was really good to see that and the amount of impact that's made in terms of people, the way that they kind of go, I'm so glad we've got one of those. And I remember when I started at that company, it was one of the things that I said to one of the graduates that I mentor, who is a fantastic young female engineer. And I said, I remember when I started out my apprenticeship, and like with my presentation, with that horrible old photo of me in a canning plant in Rugby. And I said, the one thing that I hope that you never experience in your career is going into a factory and having to walk across site because there isn't a female toilet there. And it was like this big thing. And I was like, you know, you're young, it's the next generation, you shouldn't have to get that. And so, and what I've seen in terms of people becoming more inclusive, so we are heading in the right direction slowly, but we are heading there. And I think we're increasing in pace, so. Yeah.
Thanks, Kat. Horrified to hear that you had the same experiences as I did, well, 40 years ago now, visiting a college then, which only had male loos, and the men had to guard the loos while the female students used it. But I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. So I'll say thank you very much indeed to our people who've asked us questions. And I'll say an enormous, huge thank you to all our speakers, Kat, Ruth, Megan, and Caroline. And thank you very much indeed. I'll hand back to Dean now. Thank you.